and they would come to trade in that area, and apparently Joseph of Arimathea planted his staff in the hill, and up sprang the holy thorn tree. And the holy thorn tree comes from Israel, the only place it comes from. But they're growing in Glastonbury, and they blossom once a year on Christmas. In the middle of winter, it's snowing out. This tree blossoms beautiful, white, fragrant blossoms. And the tradition is the first blossoms, for hundreds of years, the first blossoms from this tree are given to the queen. So they're totally connected to the whole legend still. But unfortunately, last year, some vandals cut down the tree. And you go to this tree, and it's on this ridge, and it overlooks the whole valley. It's a beautiful view. And there's like a metal fence around it to protect it. And then people over the years tie their little prayer things on it. So the whole tree was draped in these beautiful, like, fabric kind of prayer things, and all around with pictures and sacred things and crystals. And then some people came and cut all the branches off of the tree, and it was a national horror when that happened all around the world. I don't know if you remember seeing that on Yahoo News or anything, on Google or anything, earlier last year. But the good news is the tree is growing back, and so that's my trip of England. I'll talk more about the crop circles today.
So what was when you went to the chalice and did the ceremony, what was the intention that you set during the ceremony?
Well, the times I've done the private ceremonies in the chalice well, I'm usually with a group of women, a tour led by women, so it's a lot of goddess worship, pagan goddess worship stuff. So it's really connecting with the divine feminine there. The energy it's very, very, very feminine, healing energy there at the chalice well. And I guess that's the energy we're wanting to connect with when we're there. But the interesting thing was, last year when I was there with the group and I had the sword, I was surrounded by 14 women, and the leader of our group for that particular ceremony was a high priestess of Avalon, Coco Newport, and she has a crescent moon tattoo right on her forehead here, and she's one of the high priestesses of Avalon, very sweet woman. And so she took my sword, I got on my knees in front of her, surrounded by 14 women, and she gave me my lordship. And, did this whole thing for me to honor and protect the feminine and this whole thing, and I had Crystal with me. And then it was right after that I found out that she's pregnant and that I'm going to have a son. So there was this kind of whole mythic, noble thing about me getting the sword and to protect the goddess, and then...
So we should call you Sir Peter.
No, Lord Sterling.
His lordship?
So, yeah, it's fun. It's a whole other world over there.
That sounds wonderful. There is something, whenever my mother is English, and whenever I go to England and that plane lands, there's a feeling of going home. And I always thought it just was about my heritage, but there's something very special about being in Britain, and it is the land of mysticism, with many other ones as well. But it's not just about the royal family and history. There is a great deal of mysticism and history there to be tapped into. There's an energy there that you can feel. That people talk about Sedona and Egypt and Machu Picchu and Mount Shasta and Hawaii, but Britain is definitely one of the ones that I would suggest you put on your bucket list of places to go to for sacred journeys.
And Israel.
And Israel, yes, of course.
A lot of powerful energy there.
Yes, very much
A lot
so.
of history.
Yeah, there's something also, about the Holy Grail and what that means for us, the Grail, and what that means for our own spiritual process, and to reflect upon the meaning of the Holy Grail, which, the history says that the Holy Grail was the cup that when Christ was on the cross and the soldier pierced his side and the blood ran, that they caught the blood in that, and before it was used at the Last Supper, it was what Jesus, he tells it, and then they caught the blood in it. But it's more than just a cup. It's more of it represents more of the lineage, of the bloodline, and how Jesus was from the house of David, King David, and and there's also the Archangel Michael was kind of like the gatekeeper for that whole bloodline lineage. But King David played the harp, and so he's been one of the mythic kind of archetypes that I've connected with. For those of you who don't know, David was the young boy who came into the palace of King Saul. Saul was the king at that point, and Saul was kind of demented. He had migraines and he didn't feel good. He was under a lot of stress, and so the only thing that would soothe him was the harp playing of David. He would summon David to come into the royal palace and play his harp for him. He had a small lyre harp that he would strum, and then he would just go into rapture, into ecstasy, and just channel these beautiful songs, which became the Psalms in the Bible. So those were all channeled by David. But what happened was everybody became very much infatuated with David and his harp playing, and he was kind of a good-looking guy. And Saul had a daughter, and Saul's daughter kind of fell for David, and King Saul didn't like that because David was becoming more popular than him. So he banished David after a while out to the desert, and that's when he went out to the desert, and then he met up with probably with the Essenes, and lived out in wherever the area was. And then he came back because it was foretold that he was going to, because he was of that royal bloodline. And then he came back and he fought Goliath, who was the Semonite. He was like really tall, 9 feet tall, Goliath. He did the slingshot, and he knocked him out, hit him right in the third eye. Went back, and that's when he rose to power and became the king, when he slayed Goliath. So I love all this stuff because it creates a rich meaning for me. So much of being here in our country, we don't have a rich heritage of our history. Our history only really goes back 200-300 years, but when you can follow your ancestral heritage, especially if you're connected to that bloodline, then there's so much richness in it that can add kind of meaning to our own contemporary experience that we're having right now, because the same archetypal themes are playing out in our own life, of course, as far as honor and virtue and dedication and commitment and integrity for the cause, for the mission, like the Crusades, that we're all being light workers and carrying that torch of the new consciousness here at this time. It's a noble mission and an endeavor to do that, and not always easy for us, especially as we know if we've been an awakened one, and then we bring that new consciousness, say, into our family, who's not awake, we can meet with a lot of resistance, and I'm sure we've all had that kind of experience. And as we go out to the world, there's many people that are not opening up to receive the new consciousness. They have a very limited perspective and a viewpoint. Yet to know that we're all warriors of light, and to carry our sword and to walk in alignment with the righteousness of the sword of Excalibur and the sword of truth that Archangel Michael carries, that it's very empowering, and it also brings us a lot of protection, kind of divine protection, especially at this time when there's a lot of uncertainty with all the changes going on. To walk in the knowingness of who you are on a soul level, and to walk forward in confidence no matter what's happening, even if our lives are falling apart, to never lose touch with who we are at our core. So much of when things start to change and fall apart, we can feel kind of abandoned and disempowered, and that we're not in control of our life, and that perhaps we're even being punished sometimes. But I think all of us are being challenged to let go at extraordinary levels right now, and to embrace a new consciousness, a new manifestation of this energy in our lives, as our soul is really wanting to align with this current and this flow of this new energy, and to move us into a higher expression of who we are, which means that we have to surrender and allow that force to come into our life in a powerful way, and to kind of slay the ego with the sword, and to really align ourselves and get down on our knees and